podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Oh, it's a goal. Who got the assist? Who got the assist?
Greetings to sisters. We approach the most wonderful time of the year with 3 game weeks in a week as FPL spoils us managers rotten, or rather puts us on a pedestal, knocking us down brutally afterwards, I'm sure. And on a week where many of the remaining first half chips are in play, Sam and I are back and feeling, dare we say it, slightly more chipper than the last few pods. I'm sorry. You're right, mate. How you doing? I've Saints 3-0 up. So yeah, happy bunny, I imagine.
Yeah, I mean, people in the chat are already noticing my smile. I don't remember the last time I've been this happy about football in a long, long time. The weekend was amazing. We'll go on to the FPL side of it in a bit. But Saints put in the best performance I've seen in ages, and now we're winning 3-0 tonight. It can only go wrong from here. So I'm fully expecting some sort of glorious comeback for Leicester in the second half, but I'll enjoy it while it lasts. But yeah, I'm very well, thank you, Tom. And obviously we both will come into this, I think, with pretty big smiles on our faces. So hopefully that positive energy can help drag us through today's pods. We do have a few things to run through today. As always, we are Who Got the Assist. On today's agenda, Game Week 12, we'll have a quick look back at how we both did. If you're here for our weekly dose of laughing at both of our scores, then you might want to fast forward that bit if you're listening back later on. We'll do a lot more on chips today. So obviously we know that a lot of people are in different situations. Tom ran a poll on X and on Blue Sky just to figure out what the sort of chip situations are for the majority. And it does look like a pretty big free hit week. We'll be covering that. We've also, we're also going to cover triple captain and the other stuff as well. So we'll go through all of that in detail. We'll mostly be focusing on the free hit and triple captain, especially looking at the free hit draft. We've picked one out from Blue Sky to have a look at and take as a bit of a sample on what we might be looking at if we were free hitting. And we also need to figure out how worried those of us who aren't free hitting should be. Both of us aren't. So we can hopefully figure that out between us, whether or not we are really quite petrified and need to be ordering bigger sofas this weekend. And then, of course, as always, we'll be doing the regular captaincy chats and form versus fixtures, lots in the mix there, and maybe a quick word on the potential for rotation over the Christmas period. And then, of course, 1 week punts and our teams to wrap up the video. Tom, in particular, has a few questions on what he wants to do. So let's help guide him through and figure out what the best strategy is for his team. It is Tuesday, the 25th of November. Lots of European action going on in the background. And of course, the mighty Southampton are playing, which is why we're all here. But jokes aside, shall we have a look at how we got on in Game Week 12?
Yeah, for once, it's actually something I want to look at. So yeah, 65 for me. Looks like we finally got lift off, which is very good. The rank halved after basically the majority of my differentials came in, which was really good. It got Tarko versus Rodon, the bench wrong, but I expected United to beat Everton, especially with a self-inflicted red card on the docket so early on in. But alas, and double alas, I guess, as a Bruno owner. But at one point, I was 30 points above safety. I was settled for 20 odd, and the Schadenfreude train stops here for now. A big green despite a captain fail, and despite having another missed pen in my team, with Thiago missing that. It was missing the second one. Raya blanked, but other than that, returns of some kind across the board. Minte with yet another pair of assists, including an FPL assist to add to his legit assist. Enzo with the 8-point goal at the last minute, which is incredibly pleasing. I think that when that went in, I was like, oh yeah, that's awesome. Big Joe Anderson with the 10 pointers, obviously absolutely lovely. And the transfer in the end was Munoz with 14 points, with scoring the goal. Was all set to do Virgil van Dijk after last week's pod, but annoyingly heard after that. Not annoyingly in terms of my point score, but annoyingly because of what I'd said in the pod, that Munoz had in fact left Colombia's camp early due to family matters and wasn't playing in that early morning fixture I mentioned. So that immediately pushed him right back up the priority list for me, which is obviously a good thing in terms of how it turned out. He's on 4 yellows now. And as we were discussing offline, Sam, I think he'll definitely get his 5th against United this weekend in a tactical way. Absolutely no question about that. Just quite a lot to think about in terms of the games coming up with him and Senasai both on yellow cards, 4 yellow cards, actually. Really, really good week. And the big green, of course, helped by blanks for the threats. Bumo only DEFCON for Saka and João Pedro's 1 pointer. So up from 1.8 million to 900k. The love bombing has turned into making it official between myself and the OFPL. I have to say we are now a couple, and I am receiving several messages, which mostly unsolicited in the middle of the night, asking me to come over. Yeah, very happy. How about you?
You up basically throughout the night. It's great on it. Before we move on, it is great to see you not only just continue that green arrow streak, but get that really quite needed game week half or rank half in game week, which I think we talked about a couple of times on the pod. And just goes to show wherever you're at, you get one of these kind of game weeks, which you just need a couple of big differentials to pan out well, or a combination of a few, and one game week, and your whole perspective on the season can look very, very different. So if you're out there, just as a bit of a case study, one game week can really make the difference. So don't give up yet. Keep plugging away. Keep doing the right things. And like Tom, again, you can have that rank halving week and get back on the front foot again. So your top million, all of the rank targets are well within your grasp now, Tom. It's very exciting that we're both doing quite well at the moment for once. I think this is the highest we've both been collectively at this point whilst we've been podding together. So onto my team, not quite as good as you, 57 points, but still very happy with the performance. I made 3 free transfers out of my 4. So I rolled the 4th going into this game week. I've already spent one of them. I'll go on to that later on. But coming in were Lacroix, Bruno Fernandes, and Mark Giu. Going out was Voltemada, who I would have benched anyway. He blanked. Longstaff, who I would have probably benched anyway. He didn't do anything. And Gabriel, who was injured. Lacroix is now my favourite man in the universe. So 11 points from him. He did lose DEFCON, which I was a little bit gutted by, but hey, I can't really complain too much. 11 points from him with that assist to Munoz, which I'm not sure he knew all that much about, but I will absolutely take that. Anderson off my bench, a bit of jam there for Semenyo. We take that as well. 10 points from him. And Enzo with the other big haul, 11 points from him. So yeah, 57 points up to 350k. Again, if someone had told me after 12 game weeks I was here, I would have absolutely taken that. So very happy. 2 free transfers going into game week 13. And one of them is already well in my dust and well used. So we'll come on to that later on, but happy with my position, not complaining at all.
Yeah, very good, very good. Hopefully, by the end of this year, both in a good position to end the season strong and not be idiots. I think as well. Just
there's time.
We've said it a few times, but I think there was definitely a point, especially on Saturday, about kind of 10:30 when I was thinking, I could take a hit here and get Saka in for Enzo, and obviously I didn't do that in the end. And I think that that's a bit of a bellwether for this season. I'm going to try to resist that sort of last minute urge and that last minute impulse. And I think that I've learning from up to 10 years of experience now just to not do that. You feel better about it and try to avoid hits this year. I think that's, as I said to you earlier, like, apart from getting a 3-figure, 2-figure, 1-figure or winning FPL, that's the last achievement on lot for me, is getting through a season without taking a hit. And I'm quite keen now. We're kind of quite a long way, and it's like kind of when you get on an exercise sort of roll and you do exercise every day, and suddenly you kind of start feeling guilty if you don't do it. I feel like I want to kind of keep the good vibes rolling in terms of just managing my team and taking a bit of absorbing it with the bench, having that depth and all that sort of thing. So yeah, all good, all good. This week, there is a hell of a lot going on. A bit of a strange one where we're going to touch on and analyze something neither of us are actually doing in a lot of cases, because it's a very seemingly, as Sam said earlier on, popular week to free hit. We did a poll on X, and I launched a conversation on Blue Sky. Go figure why I treat them slightly differently. We showed over a third on the free hit on X, and other polls seem to also suggest that. So probably 30-35% of people with the engaged community on there. And the discussion on Blue Sky, thanks so much for all your responses, got about kind of 50 or so replies. And I'd say around the same amount had their free hit active. So it's not an insignificant amount of people on it, worth covering. And it was a great City lineup tonight for it as well, Sam, for people who are considering that. I think that's probably, for those who haven't seen, or if you haven't seen it yet, if you're listening back, it was pretty much kind of, on Foot Manager when you play your second 11 for Pep. We'll definitely as well think about kind of, that squad, and we've got a squad that's been donated, which we'll speak about in a minute, and also discuss the coping angle. As Sam mentioned, how scared are we? A decent amount of triple captain as well, around 18%, according to my poll. 1 in 5 managers nearly responding, considering they're using it, and of course, some wildcards and bench boost mastered around. It feels like kind of before we get into the crazy period, Sam, this is like the last chance saloon many people are looking at for definitely the free hit triple captain. We'll talk about maybe come 17, maybe a fullback in 19. But I think one thing before we get to the team we've got here, Sam, to look at, which is kindly donated by Uncle Joe, from Fantasy Football Scout. I just want to ask one thing. If you do have that kind of free hit and triple captain left, which it feels like a lot of people do out there in the ether, what order would you kind of favour doing it in? It feels like free hit 13 and triple captain Haaland versus West Ham in 17 is what many are favouring from my light scrolling on the hellscape. But does that kind of chime with you in terms of what you think people are kind of setting up to do if you've got those two remaining?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. The reason I would agree with that is because the triple captain, let's say Haaland gets injured, worst case scenario, by the time you get there, it's more problematic to use it against West Ham for whatever reason. There are still other alternatives which aren't that far off. A free hit is a much more powerful chip in the sense that you've got the ability to change your full 11. So you can target a whole bank of fixtures. Now, there are other free hit weeks which might work better for different, very unique, very specific teams. But the reason it's popular this week is because all of the teams that we're targeting aren't actually that well owned outside of the likes of Haaland and maybe Van Dijk. So Liverpool, Man City, Aston Villa, Brentford, those are the general bones of the free hit this week. Whereas later on in the season, or later on in the first half of the season, the popular free hit weeks I've seen still include about 4 or 5 minimum players that are already quite popular, and you probably want either side of the free hit as well. So in the run up to it, there'll probably be popular transfers in, and then coming out the back of it, they're not players that you want to bin off at the end of a free hit. You want to continue with them. So I think naturally, again, it's hard to know without seeing very specific examples, specific teams. I would try to prioritize free hit for game week 13 over later, because it does feel like the most different your side is going to be. But again, there are different sides out there. Some of you will have a very different makeup than I might or you might, Tom. Whereas triple captain, it is much easier to just chuck it at any given game week, even if it's not Haaland and worst case scenario happens. The difference in expected points isn't going to be that vast that it makes a significant difference. Whereas free hit, it really could do, and it could completely dampen any sort of upside that you might have. So I prioritize free hit over triple captain, but that's, again, blanket statement, not seeing your specific team. And as annoying as it is, as cliched as it is, that does kind of matter, because it's what your side looks like either side and the amount of differences that would happen that week.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's all about sort of the salient opportunity for you, I suppose. I was speaking to a friend of the pod, Nick Wright, earlier on, and he was saying that he was looking at game week 16 for his free hit, because in his plans he doesn't really have that many Arsenal coming in, but Arsenal play Wolves that week, so it suits him with only one Arsenal in situ to maybe go for it then maybe take the punt on Liverpool players that are at home to Brighton, and so on and so forth. So there is some wiggle room. I feel like we both used ours. It's worth mentioning we both used ours in game week 4. So it's worth mentioning that there is, it's not like that you have to do it this week, but the reason why there is a bit of movement behind it is obviously some of the big voices are doing it, and also kind of it does suit a lot of teams out there, especially when you think about the template team that Sam and I looked at a few weeks ago. Cool. Let's go into the free hit first. Now, we're not ourselves on free hit, and I thought when asking these questions on socials, it might be worth grabbing someone else's current draft, just because it's always different to be talking about something when you're not active on it. A bit like how it's hard for people not to be subjective when you're talking about your FPL teams and tell the other person to buy your own team. That's why I like you, Sam, because you're very good at kind of putting yourself in my shoes, because you're an empathetic individual, but a lot of people aren't very good at that. So yeah, we canvassed, and I really like the team that Joe from Fantasy Football Scout sent us, and obviously asked him if I could share it this week with permission, of course. Find you on Blue Sky, of course, at FPL Joe, on Fantasy Football Scout, and in Tom Glover's cupboard, of course. For the purposes of this tape, I'll read out. For the purposes of the tape, I'll read out his team, which is in goal. You have Emi Martinez, obviously the Wolves game. Back three of Virgil at the moment. I've got a note on that. O'Reilly, who's obviously got the home game against Leeds, and Collins, the DEFCON hero at Burnley at home. It's a 3-5-2. So in midfield, you've got Mohamed Salah, Kevin Sade, he's got the home game against Burnley, Morgan Rogers, Jeremy Doku, and then Morgan Gibbs-White. And then up front, the front two, as you'd expect, Haaland with the armband and Thiago. And on the bench is Anderson, Rain Dildo, and Mark Gu. Joe says Van Dijk is unlikely to make the cut. He's just trying to figure out exactly what he does with that spot. And also, echoing what you said, Sam, earlier on, double Villa, triple Brentford and Man City, plus Salah and two others. In my case, the punt and Morgan Gibbs-White. That's the 11 that he has eloquently should be the free hit norm. Views?
Yeah, I mean, it's the exact right balance of teams that I'd be targeting. I'd want triple City in there. I'd want probably double Liverpool, if not triple. I've got reservations about Van Dijk, considering the clean sheet odds, I think, are under a third, so 31% now with some of the models. And again, obviously, that's a manifestation of what we've seen. It's not just the models have chucked out a random number. They've been quite poor defensively, and that's what we're seeing in the data. So Van Dijk, for the money, echoing Joe in what he said there, I would have reservations about. But again, the makeup of the draft, couple of Villa, 2 or 3 Brentford, couple of Liverpool, 3 Man City. I think that is the balance that I would also have. I have put together a draft that I'm going to talk about tomorrow morning, but I think there's only a couple of major differences here. It's the same sort of makeup. The specific individuals from the different teams might change as well, but generally speaking, I think this is where people are going to be going. And I get why people are on the fence about free hitting for this exact reason, because looking at this, there are a lot of very different picks that no one really owns in here, but it is going without Arsenal, who are the best team in the league by quite a distance at the moment, going without Chelsea, although they've got a tough fixture, Man United, Crystal Palace. Or these teams don't have easy fixtures, but they do have very good high upside players in there. So could it go wrong? Absolutely. But every week you can play a free hit in the first half of the season. It could go equally wrong. So I think this is as good a week as any to take a chance on it, because this is the most different that it's ever going to look from your regular week to week template. So I do like it, especially the triple Man City. You can't really ask for a much better team to be taking on at home than Leeds. And other weeks, you might not be able to squeeze in all 3 because, again, Man City are quite hard to predict. Whereas this week might be a bit easier to predict, although we've had some news coming through the pods, haven't we, during the recording, and Foden, Doku and O'Reilly are all on at half time. So what does all this mean, Tom?
Yeah, cheeky, churky time. I mean, I think kind of what the tension you're describing is crystallized in the point by the artist formerly known as Hindu Monkey, who asked, "Do you prefer to go all in on 3 or 4 teams on the free hit, or spread the risk reward over 7 teams?" Now, I feel like that's kind of the eternal struggle you have when you're trying to figure out that 1 week, the balance versus aggression sort of setup. You missing out on those bankable teams in preference to go variance hunting effectively. And honestly, you just don't know, because it's 1 week. And if you take Arsenal, for example, you've got to kind of look at that Chelsea game and think that possibly, because the Man City game has already been and gone, that is probably the toughest, according to the table right now, at least. Well, and the Man City away is coming up at some point. It's just way later in the year. I think it's in April. But for the very kind of short term, that is the toughest game we're going to have, right? So maybe on free hit, you look at it and think, well, that is the game that I go against Arsenal in, and I think the conditions are probably quite good because there's no Gabriel hanging around. That you can probably just about get away with that. I do think it is a good week to do it. I do look at this team, maybe kind of just keying into that idea of kind of how scared am I. There are loads of players in that I have no interest in covering, if that makes sense.
Mm.
That makes the foundations of a free hit team that you can be encouraged by if you are on free hit this week. The likes of Sade, the likes of Morgan Rogers, who may kind of elbow his way in. I think that those individuals are those ones that I would look at it and think, okay, that's a bit concerning. But you are missing, okay, United didn't exactly cover themselves in glory last time out, but you are missing a United player who, especially with Bumo, carry decent ownership. You do miss the likes of Minte. You are missing the Palace boys as well. And I think that, it is possibly, to answer Hindi Monkey's question, the time when you do probably try to go for that all-in strategy, I think, on a free hit. That there is always going to be some element of like coverage somewhere, somehow. In this case, it's not going to be too much of an issue to be quote unquote covering the likes of Haaland, right? But outside of him, as we've already said, you've got Semenyo, who it's been reported tonight has been in training with Bournemouth today, having decent ownership. But I mean, that's probably kind of one that you can avoid. I think they're away at Sunderland, which probably isn't the easiest game, even though they are an in-promoted team. And then other than that, it was Gabriel who was kind of a template staple, no more. Good time to take advantage, I suppose, of the opportunity that's in front of you. So I think overall, Sam, I think with free hit, it is incumbent upon you to be fairly aggressive, isn't it? And I do like kind of having that individual like a Gibbs White or something thrown in, because you'd never look at a Gibbs White, I don't think, at the moment. I think he is kind of very overpriced for what he offers. But on a one-game basis, sure, why not?
Yeah, exactly. And the fixtures do line up to suggest that some of these picks that are unfashionable, that will have lower effective ownership, can or should get close to or beat the more popular players like a Saka, like a Bruno, like an Mbermo. And that's the week that you want to be trying to take advantage of some positive variance. It's like going into a casino and playing a game of roulette, but the roulette table has like double the amount of reds than blacks. It's like, yeah, I'm going to chuck the money on red. I'm going to give that a go. Obviously, it might go against me, but the odds are slightly more in my favor than if I went to a different roulette table that was more balanced and even. So I think the all-in strategy, it is probably the scariest way of playing it, but it's also the way that provides the most potential upside. And on a free hit, it's only one game week. I mean, I can say this now, because inevitably someone will come back the next week and it'll be like, it was a disaster. It all went horribly wrong. I'm 50 points down. That will be the very edge case of what could possibly happen. And the other edge case is you could be 50 points up on the average. But the more likely thing that's going to happen is you're about a 5 to 10 point range within what is already going to be the average score. In one single game week where there are no doubles, no blanks, there will be edge pieces. There will be edge cases where it's like, okay, I've been really screwed over or I've had an absolute blinder. But the majority of teams are not going to get 20 points over the average or 20 points below the average. It's going to be still fairly bundled, but you're hoping to get on the right side of that bell curve and get on the positive side of things. So I think this is as good a week as any to get as far to the right-hand side and as above the bell curve average that you are going to get in the next few game weeks before we get into the doubles and blanks. So if I had a free hit left, I would be looking at playing it this week, taking advantage of all of that I guess free effective ownership that you're gaining on all of these players over some of the more popular picks. And yeah, it's a risk, but every free hit that you play in the first half of the season is a risk. So it's as good a week as any to give it a go.
Yeah, I think that was literally the point I was about to make as well, that the free hits this side of the new year, there's not that level of guarantee that you tend to have if you're free hitting in a blank. Like if you're free hitting a blank, you're basically using a chip to give yourself a green arrow in these situations. And this is why, linking to the wider point about being positive about the changes they've made this year, this is why it's more fun, isn't it? It's fun until the red arrow comes, but it's more fun to be in the situation where you can punt in quite a lot of these players and have a good time of it. And for what it's worth, I completely kind of agree with what you said and what Joe said, really, in terms of what the free hit norm should be. It's probably not that it picks itself. I think we should probably maybe talk about a few 50-50s here, Sam.
Yeah.
It's probably not that it picks itself, but I think the parameters, if you are just kind of going on the decision tree, should I be more aggressive or should I be kind of a bit more conservative with it? Probably be more aggressive. I think that's the way to go. I mean, if you're aggressive, what do those picks look like? Starting at the back, I think the three at the back is probably good. I think Nico O'Reilly, who's on form versus Fitch this week, definitely worth looking at. A Brentford defender between Collins and Vandenberg, absolutely fine. Don't really mind which. I'm sure because you've got loads of money, you might as well get Collins for the DEF CON. Could do KO day and hope that he does some long throws. He did create quite a few chances, I think, in a few games. So he does have that in his locker, but it's always worth going with the DEF CONs now. And then the final one, as Joe said, Virgil van Dijk unlikely to make the cut. Maybe that's a question for this week. I'm not entirely sure right now where my third defender would go, thinking about the rest of the matchups which are kind of out there. I don't know. Maybe looking at players like Porro or Michael Keane, all of these incredibly exciting picks.
Yeah.
Maybe a Murillo or a Milenkovic. Milenkovic, I think, has had a lot of he's had quite a few chances recently. I think it's something like an attempt to game or something like that from set pieces over the last 6. I mean, a player like that could be an interesting one to chuck in. But I completely agree with Joe's sort of reticence in terms of a Van Dijk. I mean, could there be an argument, Sam, maybe to chuck in a Calafiori or a Timber in that slot, or is that just too boring?
I was going to say this one specific spot where Van Dijk is now is the one that would cause me the most grief, and probably the place where I'd buckle a little bit with the all-in strategy. I think Arsenal's defense has been so good and is well owned as well. So there is a bit of a defensive attitude there, but also they've got attacking upside. Calafiori and Timber have plenty of attacking upside. But then also, I would chuck in Munoz as well. At home there's always a good chance of him getting some sort of attacking return there. It's not the easiest fixture in the world. They're not going to have it all their own way against Man United, I'm sure. But I can still see him doing really well. So I think out of those 3 right now, I'd actually probably go with Munoz, given it's at home, and Chelsea are in some pretty good form at the moment. I can see them causing Arsenal more problems than Spurs did, put it that way. But that would be the one position where I'm like, yeah, I can buckle a little bit, compromise a bit on the all-in strategy and go with an Arsenal defender or Munoz, not just for coverage, but also because I genuinely believe that they do still have the upside, even if they don't have the best possible fixture this week.
Yeah, Chelsea are top for Team XG at the moment. It just kind of underlines that. And I think that you're right in terms of the Munoz call, actually, come to think of it, just because it's just a kind of exposure, covering exposure, isn't it? Because if Palace do keep a clean sheet, then the ownership of that is so high that you might as well have a Munoz who's probably still going to be lowly owned enough. I think you're probably going to max for 25% ownership for him. Gahey being the main sort of carrier of a lot of that ownership. So you've got that covered, and you've also got a player who has the upside to his game. So there we go. I think that we've solved it. We've solved the free hit, Sam. Is it worth mentioning the goal? Is it worth mentioning the goalkeeper? Probably not. I think Martinez perfectly fine.
I'd go Kelleher, honestly.
Yeah, Kelleher and Collins, and double up that way. And
Kelleher and Cash, I think.
Cash, okay.
Yeah, okay. I'd save a bit of money, go for the attacking upside on Cash. That would be my plan on that.
Is there much attacking upside? I mean, it depends, I suppose.
Cash has got a decent bit of attacking upside, and he's cheap as well. So the combination is a little bit cheaper. Yeah, I mean, there's not much in it, but
no,
we'll get into the midfield, I suppose, with a specific City pick. I would probably go for the more expensive City pick and therefore cheapen up in the defense a little bit. And I think Kelleher at home to Burnley is a really good chance of a clean sheet. He might get some save points.
Save penalty.
I think, yeah, it maybe say either got a great record saving penalties. Either of them do. I don't think there's much in it, but for the saving of a little bit of money just to make other things more affordable, I think I could get on board with either, honestly.
Yeah,
but,
me too. Me too. I think that would be absolutely fine for me as well. All right. So in midfield, to Salah or not Salah, I just feel like it's incumbent on you to Salah this week.
Surely it's half
any
the
other
point.
options. Yeah.
Like, he's 14.2 million, not going to own him any other time at the moment. Like, if he's ever going to haul, it's this week, surely. Like, I get he's been terrible as a pick this season, but like, he is still a high upside player. And because he's 14.2 million, no one's going to own him. So you take that, like, because he is affordable in a free hit. He's not affordable otherwise. So I would absolutely have him. I know he's been terrible, but I'd still have him.
Definitely ticking up a little bit, actually, somehow. It looked very lively, I thought, against Forest, despite the fact that obviously the initial result.
First half an hour for sure, yeah.
In the top 10 now for non-penalty ownership, worth mentioning, Salah. Still don't think he's going to hit 150 points, though, according to someone's brilliant pre-season bet.
I really hope that comes in for you now, because that is mega. What a claim.
I know. No one's going to care, but
I will.
I'll be personally very happy myself. I think Sade versus Dango. I think either one is fine. If you need the extra million, go with Dango. If not, go with Sade. I mean, Dango is one of those who just seems to attract big chances somehow. So he's kind of thinking about his time at Bournemouth when he was the starting 9. So yeah, I think he's worth a thought. Rodgers, I think is we'll talk about him in a little bit. Gibbs White. And as kind of that kind of pump pick, Sam, before we get onto the City player, again, maybe that's one where you would kind of cast around for a player that kind of does tickle your fancy. You know, you could look at, I was listening to Clash of Correspondence earlier on, and James and Ricky were talking about maybe Brennan Johnson as a name who's going to play a decent amount of minutes because he's suspended in Europe. It's that, but you're not expecting that many minutes from him, are you? It's that sort of pick within that province, I guess, that you're looking at for that one. I think those ones are actually always the most fun, almost, you know, that individual that goes in as a bit of a wild card. Honestly, though, I'm looking through, and I just kind of wonder whether, you know, someone like Harvey Barnes or something, who just seems to be one of the streakiest players in the Premier League, whether he against Everton could be a pickup as well. I think I actually had Harvey Barnes in a free hit of mine at some point over the last couple of free hits, and he didn't do anything for me. But don't take that as read.
Yeah, I mean, he did go through that patch last season. Was it a double game week that he went absolutely gangbusters and just hauled for everyone who had him? Him and Murphy, I think, did really well. So he's got a track record for it. I'm just checking the Newcastle starting lineup today just to double check I remember it correctly. Gordon started through the middle, Barnes on the left. Voltemada benched. Now, Voltemada isn't going to be benched on the weekend. So it's Gordon versus Barnes for that left wing spot. And even if one of them goes over to the right wing, that could be Murphy, that could be Elanga. That, like, it. I'd just always be worried about Barnes. I think unless we see Wirtz in training in the next few days, I'd go Gakpo and just take a chance on it.
Yep. Okay. Fair enough. So I think Haaland and Thiago kind of locks a Man City attacker. Yeah. I think Cheeky Churky, because he's not played today, probably would be the one that I'd look at. Foden came on at half time. If not, I'd look at him. Foden is a player that we're going to speak about maybe later on, but we can talk about him here as well too. Marmoush has started tonight, so probably wouldn't have him in the list. I don't know. I guess maybe Foden, maybe Doku, maybe Shirky, like one of them, perhaps.
Yeah, it's Foden for me. I think we were talking about this offline beforehand, trying to predict what is going on in Pep's brain, even when it seems so obvious, like it does tonight, where he's rotated 10 of the 11. They were 1-0 down. They've subbed on some of their main boys at half time to try and solve things. Who knows what he's going to do over the weekend? They lost the last game against Newcastle. He could switch it up. Maybe this is a bit of a trial run for certain players to have a bit of a an audition almost to make it into the starting 11 at the weekend. Who knows? If I was predicting it and if I was on free hit, I'd go with the player I've got the most confidence on or getting good minutes, and that is Foden. Doku, I think, starts. I think Cherky probably starts as well, but they could easily come off at half time, even if things are going wrong, like we saw tonight. They could come off after 60, 70, 80. They could play the full 90, but there's that range of options that could happen. We might even get thrown a curveball and they don't even start at all, which I know it seems crazy right now, but we have seen exactly this before so many times where you're like, this player is an absolute lock to start. There's no question. He was resting the midweek, and then Pep just springs an absolute curveball and benches them yet again. And then they're out of the team for like 5 weeks in a row. It just kind of happens. He gets these ideas in his brain and he runs with it for a while until it stops working. With that in mind, it's Foden for me. I know the data's not been great. Doku has been the better pick in the sense of like he's got more attacking upside, but I just want to know that you're getting that Man City coverage and that player is on the pitch for as long as possible. And even with Foden, there's a chance he doesn't play, but I think it's less likely that he's rotated than the others.
Yeah. I mean, with Foden, the minutes are there for him. Pretty deep. It's more creative. It's more about sort of ball progressing Odegaardy role, which I mentioned kind of last week. And did have a decent chance against Newcastle. We kind of
should have had a penalty as well.
Yep, sure. So golden assist potentially on the roster another week. Maybe it struck me kind of, I was thinking about this earlier on, maybe playing that role that Reinders was playing at the start of the year, arguably. Now fourth, Foden as the fourth highest non-pen XGI underperformer over the last 6 weeks. Higher expected goal involvement than Doku. So backs up in the data. Foden's had more chances created, more shots in the box, etc. than Doku has had. And a lot of that is due to that ludicrous amount of corners. He's now up to 33, which is 13 more than nearest competitor in Longstaff. And I think that he could be one of those players that come Monday, when we're doing, or Sunday for us when we're doing the post-mortem, people may be like, "Oh, he was such an obvious pickup because he played the majority of the game versus Leeds and was involved in everything." No, I can't really fault that at all. Don't mind Doku, don't mind Cherky. But maybe I think with all the caveats involved, maybe I'll look at Foden as well. So wouldn't make too many changes to his team.
Yeah,
basically.
No,
I kind of think it does fit. It picks itself to some extent. There's probably defender 3, midfielder 5. Which City midfielder you go with, and I suppose if midfielder 5, if you don't go with that, whether you go with a third striker. But it broadly feels like some combination of a Brentford and Villa goalkeeper and defender, O'Reilly, or maybe Mateus Nunes if you're really feeling that. Munoz, Salah, Sade / Dango, Rodgers, a City player, Haaland, Thiago, and then whatever for number 11. But I mean, that kind of broadly seems to make sense for this week. And I wish you all very bad luck because I'm not on free hit myself. I own. But what a quick word for wildcarding, Sam. I mean, it's not something that we looked at in too much detail, but I suppose it's kind of a combination of this and some slightly longer term picks. But it's quite an interesting one because you've got a little bit of you've got that sort of confusing factor of the 5 free transfers as well coming up.
Yeah, it's almost a bit of a unique situation now in FPL. A couple of seasons ago, this would have been fairly common where it's like, I've got to almost use my transfers knowing that I'm going to dead end my team into a wild card. This is a little bit different in the sense that, we know we've got the 5 free transfers coming. If you wild card now, you can probably actually afford to have a couple of like 2-3 game week punts up to the point where you get reloaded to 5, because you can use almost one position in your 11 to just switch in and out for a couple of game weeks, having locked in a 15 or 14 of the 15 that you're very happy to hold through to the 5 free transfers. So one of the rare occasions where I would actually say 1-2 week punts make quite a lot of sense if you're on a wild card, especially given Man City's fixture this week. I probably would take a bit of a risk, a bit of a dice roll on a Man City midfielder, knowing that I can then move them on specifically into next game week for someone else that I know is going to start, who has a decent fixture in game week 14. And then again, maybe in game week 15 as well, ahead of the reload. And let's say worst case scenario, a couple of players go down injured in game week 13 after wildcarding. Well, you're only a couple of game weeks away from that reload anyway. So you're probably going to be okay, even with those 1 or 2 punts in there. I wouldn't go crazy. I wouldn't have a full 11 of 1-2 week punts that are like really heavily tied into the upcoming 2-3 weeks. But 1 or 2 is probably okay. And I would attack it a little bit.
Yeah, and you can do some kind of cleaning up around the edge pieces. I think it's absolutely, yeah, I'm envious of those who held on, really, because I think a lot of the wildcards do look good. I'm sorry we didn't kind of talk about it too much, but I'm assuming if you've held on wildcard for this long, you know what you're doing. Similar to those who are bench boosting this week, we've not really got a natural point to talk about you here. I'm just going to assume you know what you're doing. If you're targeting bench boost this week, and for what it's worth, I think it's probably a good idea to bench boost this week compared to last week. I'd always prefer it not straight after international break. Moving best captain up to just now. Thanks, Joe, for your free hit. Hopefully that we did justice. Is it a sweet triple captain? I think that it's probably beyond doubt, unless you don't own Haaland, in which case you're probably looking at the likes of Salah and Thiago. I think it's beyond doubt that Haaland's going to be kind of the captain pick, do not yours. It's just whether the triple captain is going to be live this week. And for me, it is live, Sam. I do wonder whether there's some suspicion that there are some narratives being put out there shaped by people who do have that free hit triple captain left, which is kind of maybe elevating the case for triple captain Haaland in 17 versus West Ham a little bit too far for my liking. Like, I think I prefer. I just think I prefer versus Leeds. I know, there's the minutes, etc. But I think in terms of what I'd call the meta state, I think Leeds' confidence is low after a decent first few weeks. They're on the bottom 4 for away XUC now. And I think Farke a dead man walking, all of which I think could contribute to a high scoring week. Yeah, Haaland may come off on the 60, 70 minute mark. And I know the last TC point he scored his goals come towards the end of the game. But the wager, the risk is, and the hope is that he had done a lot of damage by them. And on the other side, counter narrative, West Ham may have time to improve despite a dodgy second half against Bournemouth.
Yeah, I think if you don't have free hit left, and I can't remember whether I said it on this pod last week, but I think I'd probably play it. I'd get the TC done because you just never know what's coming around the corner. You've got 3 games in a week coming up. You've got Christmas fixtures. It's great looking ahead and knowing that he's got a good fixture to come. And on paper, that's amazing. But how many times in FPL have we looked 3 or 4 game weeks in the future, tried to predict exactly how our team's going to look, exactly who's going to be fit, exactly what the 11s are going to look like, and something has gone wrong? Now, Haaland's fitness record, injury record is good, but it's not spotless. So given that he's got a promoted club at home, after a midweek rest, he's come on for the final 25 minutes today, but I would still qualify that as a reasonable amount of rest. I would say it's worth just chucking it at this one at home at the Etihad against the team, like you say, who are struggling a little bit right now. The manager, I won't speculate on whether or not he's quite out the door yet, but it seems like he's pretty close. So we'll leave it at that. I think it's the week. I would take the opportunity that's given to you now, even if it's not maybe quite as good as what you think the future one is, because the future one also has risk attached to it. Because who knows, he might be injured. There might be rotation there. Something else could happen by that point, which might make it a worse pick than you currently think it is. Whereas Leeds, the one right in front of us, already looks very, very positive. So I'd do it. I get it done.
Yeah, I think the only thing, if you are free hitting this week and you're like, oh, have I missed the boat on triple caps? And probably not. I mean, it's probably on the least impactful chip of the lot. And, even if Haaland doesn't turn out to be, because of all the things that Sam said could happen in against West Ham 17, you've also got kind of Man United, the Wolves at home again with 19, I think, as a fullback.
Sure,
shove it on Bruno, shove it on Cunha or something, and just hope they don't do what they did against Everton. But yeah, there's always going to be a fallback. But yeah, it's a very short kind of discussion this week. But yeah, I think triple caps, and it does feel like there's kind of an overwhelming case if you haven't got a free hit available, just to get that done, get that sorted, and get on with it. And I will be doing that, and that'll be the end of my chips until game week 19. All right.
I'll be a lot like you after this week as well, but I think that after this week, a lot of people will have burnt through all of them. So it's going to get closer to a level playing field now.
Yeah, you've used them all, haven't you?
I have, yeah.
Yeah. So that's it. Last chance saloon. Obviously, I think you got a brace for Haaland, didn't you, in that game?
Brace and assist.
Brace and assist. Okay.
17-pointer. Yeah.
I'm not going to say no to the brace. I think one goal was probably a bit rubbish. I got that last year against Southampton in a similar situation, which is obviously a bit of a problem. But no, that's not you're not gonna be looking at that and thinking, oh, that could happen again, because that's when you get into overthinking territory. Right, form versus fixture this week. Quite a few names that I think we've kind of already started to discuss. Let's dig into them a bit further, Sam. Not on the list is Phil Foden. I've already given kind of my notes on him. I do think he's worth a real look over the next few. Leeds, Fulham and Sunderland, the next three, obviously those three being played out in a single week. And as we've seen tonight, Man City are able to field a fairly decent B team, albeit Leverkusen are having their way with them at the moment. Now, another player who we also touched upon is Jeremy Doku, who's created 36% of City's chances over the last little while. 15 chances created, 3 big chances, doing pretty well in the underlying data is equal sixth now overall, Sam, and was kind of the danger man against Newcastle. When he went off, they became a lot more one-dimensional, I felt.
Yeah.
I'm not going to ask your reviewers on Doku. I'm just going to move it now. It's obviously one that you're not particularly on board with. I am open to it. I think that the rest tonight perhaps would mean that I'd have a slight bit more hope that he'd start the next three. But that is really sort of, it's very hard to, if you're buying. You are really kind of, a lot of it rests on kind of reading the tea leaves, doesn't it? And I know that that's something that I'm slightly more comfortable with than you. But in my new sort of sensible era, I'm still looking at it and thinking, I don't know. If I was kind of gun to my head thinking about a Man City midfielder to buy, and money was no object, of course, I would still be looking at probably leaning towards Foden rather than taking the punt on Doku, who's nonetheless still very exciting.
Yeah, and I want to be careful not to discredit a pick, because he's undoubtedly a fantastic footballer. He's got high upside. The non-penalty XGI is brilliant. It's just not my kind of guy. Going into this period, I need players that I know that I don't need to look at the team sheet for. That's just the way I like to play. I get a little bit worried with any Man City players, let alone someone like Doku, who even now, if he was getting 90 minutes a week in the last few game weeks, it would be slightly different. And I'd maybe start to consider him a little bit more, but he's not even getting 90 right now. He's still only getting 70, and people are considering him now. So for me, it's not a stupid pick. It's not like I think anyone who gets him is a bad FPL player or an idiot or anything like that. It's just not someone that I could go for, because I'm just not that kind of FPL player. I can't be staring at a team sheet, crossing my fingers every single week. And I think with the 3 games in 1 week, it feels unlikely to me that I'm getting more than 140, 150 minutes out of him, and maybe 2 out of 3 starts. And if you think you're going to get more out of him, or that you can handle not getting that out of him, then absolutely fine. He's got the upside. He could haul in any single one of the next 3 game weeks. And in one of them, I almost expect him to at some point. But figuring out exactly which week that's going to happen with any Man City midfielder is difficult. With Doku, whose minutes are pretty speculative at best, is just not something I can personally get on board with. But that's just me. I play very differently to you, Tom. I play very differently to a lot of other managers, and some people like taking those high upside risks, and quite often you hear cases of it working out really well. So I will miss out on those points if they happen, but it's not for me.
you're probably not going to be too punished by it either. I think you're looking at kind of like 70, 80k transfers in this week. I mean, it's quite far down the list. I think it's just inside the top 10. And last week, I think the effective ownership, I did check. So I kind of did think there was a bit of a groundswell towards buying him in just due to social media, but actually it was around sort of 7-8%. So it is the usual risk rewards, both sides of the coin sort of thing. But yeah, I think I'm with you on that. But hey, the fact it could really annoy you if I bought him and he returned. I mean, that is obviously something to think about.
It wouldn't.
I know
annoy
it
me.
would. I know it wouldn't. But you know what I mean.
I'd be very happy for you.
Yeah, you'd be very happy. He'd say, throw his phone on the floor, storm off, go for. Where's he gone? He's gone for a 45-minute run again.
Typical. I would be like, that is so typical. After I made myself look like an idiot talking about him, but I will always reiterate, he's a fantastic player. I said similar about Kudus earlier on in the season. Great player, not for me. Kudus for a different reason, but yeah, just not my kind of pick.
I think for Doku as well, the notable, I suppose, where he's concerned is the majority of his similar to like Minte and Grealish. A lot of most of his point scoring potential was in assists. And I think that sort of dampens his ceiling a slight bit. I say that, and off he goes and gets 3 assists versus Leeds, eh? But that's another one which is worth considering a little bit. But at the price, I mean, it is priced in, and this is because we've got those 5 free transfers coming. So it is incumbent on you to move players on. If you're happy with the rest of your team and you're just kind of messing around with one slot, then I absolutely get it. Maybe this might apply to the likes of Nico O'Reilly as well, who's also on this list. O'Reilly, I mentioned he was on here last week as well, as was Thiago, we'll speak about in a minute. But O'Reilly, the most shots in the box amongst defenders over the last 6 weeks, 4th chances created, 3rd highest XGI amongst defenders as well over the last 6 weeks, behind Krejci at Wolves and Senesi. But rotation. Obviously, as we've seen tonight, there are Aït-Nouri before he goes off could kind of play a factor. And I just want to slightly raise the spectre of Ruben Diaz, Mr. Mayor Jammer here, as a potential pickup at 5.5. A steady Eddie pick, and I use those words very, very meaningfully. We've seen throughout the years, and I may end up looking like an idiot as well, but we've seen throughout the years that Pep likes to have one central defender be his anchor, be it Nelson Mendy, be it a Stones, one individual just to stick around a Laporte. And it feels like Diaz is that bloke. He doesn't really do that much. He's had his goal. So as you said to me the other day, he's probably not going to score again for the rest of the time. He's had 4 DEFCON points in the last 6, so a hit rate of 33%. But he's second best for minutes amongst defenders. So he didn't play this evening, which is probably quite key. And I suppose if you do want Man City coverage for I think he's 5.5, which actually is 0.5 cheaper than I thought he'd be. I thought he'd kind of be like a Guardiola and be kind of have dropped a little bit. No, he's 5.5. Man City's second best defense in terms of SGC. You're basically buying Edison in 2025, where your ceiling is probably 6, and he'll get a 2. As an option, which is probably why you look at O'Reilly or maybe Matheus Nunes, who I raised a couple of weeks ago, and just think, you know what, okay, they may not play against Fulham, but almost definitely are going to start against Leeds, and you've got that attacking upside. So you've got kind of another, if you're not buying a Doku or something, you've got another attacking asset, as it were, of Man City, for the next week in particular. So I am quite interested, I'm going to say, in Nico O'Reilly for this week, and hope that Fulham or Sunderland, or ideally both, I get a start. But my fear would be that Aït-Nouri plays Fulham. And then I'd have to kind of, and we'll talk about it later, I've already got quite a rickety situation when it comes to the rest of my defenders. So that's definitely giving me pause for thought there.
Yeah, I am much more tempted by O'Reilly than I am with a Doku, put it that way. Like, the minutes look better. I think he is more secure in the team just because of his importance in the role that he plays. And he has just been genuinely excellent.
Aït-Nouri's been taken off at half time. against Leverkusen in the game when they're playing the B team. I think that probably is instructs about where Aït-Nouri is in Pep's estimations at the moment.
Exactly. And although, again, don't ever read the tea leaves with Pep all too much, but you can read the previous minutes. And like I said, I've got hesitations about Doku for the exact same reasons I've got more confidence in O'Reilly, because the minutes have been better and he's been starting more consistently. And like you said, Pep does just get these players that he just has a bit more confidence in all of a sudden. We saw it with Gvardiol in a similar position to what O'Reilly's playing now last season, that he does just rely on them. And when they've got a system that's working, they do tend to stay in. Now, does that mean he plays 90 in each of the next 3? Who knows? Probably not. He'll probably miss one of them, but I think he'll probably start 2 of the 3. On a free hit, I would definitely include him now. Given the price, given the attacking upside, I would take the punt on him against Leeds on a free hit. Transfer in, I'm maybe not like fully sold yet, but if we get through this next week and he started all 3, I think by that point I will be fully sold, and he will be looking like a transfer in for me pretty quickly after that. Or if we get past Fulham and he started both of those 2, maybe even in game week 15, if I've got enough confidence there. I'm not quite there on a transfer, but on a free hit, absolutely.
Let's tea leaf it a slight bit with when it comes to O'Reilly. So Aït-Nouri's been taken off at half time in a game like this. City, obviously, I think if City had won against Newcastle, then I'd be kind of saying that, yeah, I kind of feel like that there's more rotatability about him. But I think that it feels like traitors were trying to grab a few bits of evidence, doesn't it? But City losing to Newcastle, so they need to win. O'Reilly being the best player in that position, having the minutes this year, and also the fact that they need to make up ground against Arsenal does kind of make me wonder whether the next 3 games Pep just kind of thinks, right, okay, I just need to try to win these. We've all been down that road.
Maybe that's why he rotated tonight.
Yeah,
but again, that's just reading the tea leaves, isn't it? It's
maybe
hard,
that's the rest.
To know.
But he's only been given. He has been given 45 minutes, so they've lost 2-0, and maybe that will kind of colour Pep. So Pep does have favourites. I think that's also fair to say. And O'Reilly's in the circle of trust right now. No, I do really like it. Honestly, I do think there's a pretty good chance that he's my transfer in this week. I've got loads of money in the bank, and we'll talk about it later on. But I could swap him in for Rodon, and have 4 good defenders. We shall see.
Right, actually, interesting.
Yeah, we all could. And Thiago, up 0.5 now. Not entirely sure what else to say. He is always on this list. I think that this is a good time, Sam, for you to provide some spoilers.
Yeah, I bought him straight in to 6.5 million. I got him before the rise, so 6.4 for me. I had João Pedro. What more do you want me to say? It's pretty easy transfer. Yeah, I'm fully aware that a lot of the XG that he's put up is from penalties, but Brentford do have a knack of winning quite a lot of penalties. Brighton have a similar knack as well. So I did briefly consider Welbeck. I just think over this period, I've got a bit more confidence in Thiago's minutes than I do Welbeck's. And that Burnley fixture is really hard to ignore. I do have to deal with game week 14, Arsenal away, but I in my transfer plans, I can find a way to bench him in that week. And even if he comes off my bench, he's a penalty taking striker who gets 90 minutes. I will take it. It's 1 week, even against tough opponents. If there's ever a player that I wouldn't mind playing against a tough opponent, it would be a penalty taking striker, because all it takes is 1 shot, 1 chance, and you can get yourself a 9-pointer there. So yeah, he's in for me. I think great value for money, good underlying data, great minutes on penalties, ticks every single box I could want, and some good fixtures to come after Arsenal in 14's out of the way.
Job done. I thought you were about to sort of break into lose yourself then. You got 1 shot,
I was close. I was close.
Yeah. Right. There's not very much more to say there. Morgan Rogers, back on many people's agendas. obviously 2 goals. He's on free kicks. That's intriguing.
Yeah.
The eye test from a lot of people, I only watched the highlights of that game, was that he was pretty rubbish apart from a couple of good moments versus Leeds. Villa, who were the crisis club at the start of the year, maybe we should shake that up because they are up to 4th. Rodgers himself, same amount of shots as the likes of João Pedro, Welbeck and co, but it's not loads. I mean, we've really spoken about the freak that is Welbeck in terms of big chances to shots ratio this year. João Pedro, we've spoken about him to death. We're very glad he's not really something we need to think about. And he finally recovering Villa in terms of creativity now. They've posted the highest XGs of the season in both game week 11 and 12. Wolves and Brighton, depending on which Brighton show up, and that's an away game midweek, he's going to have the minutes. The underlying data isn't there. I think his points have obviously pushed up by the brace this weekend, but still potentially an individual you might want to pick up, maybe within the scope of a free hit where he's almost definitely in, or maybe on a wild card where you just think, okay, well, by come game week 15, maybe he's the kind of use it or lose it transfer, and when they've got Arsenal at home.
Yeah, he's the sort of short-term wildcard pick I could get on board with because the minutes are going to be there in both of the next 2 weeks. Obviously, the carrot is game week 13 against Wolves at home, who are all at sea at the moment. That's a great fixture to be bringing him in for. But it's not like you need to get rid of him for Brighton in game week 14 either. And given it's the midweek fixture where other 1 week punts, Doku obviously being around that price as well, might be a bit shakier on the minutes. He won't be. He'll be getting 80 plus that week, you would think. He's being encouraged to get forward more and shoot more by Emery. He's being apparently hounded by him to get in the box in those specific moments. So as much as that means, I mean, obviously all players would like to get into the box more and shoot more, surely, but it's on his mind. And if he's on free kicks, he's in the penalty conversation at least because Emery name-checked him last time they were having a penalty discussion. So I don't think it's impossible that he creeps into that at some point. He's never going to be an awful pick because he's got that security of minutes in a good side and he plays fairly advanced. The data's not been good at all, but he still does have a bit of a knack and different routes to points. So yeah, I don't mind it whatsoever. I'm not quite there on buying him with free transfers yet. On a wild card, if you've got the 5 free transfers coming up, I could see a way that he would get included, and on a free hit, he would be in for me.
Yeah, absolutely. One player though that you should buy because I've had him for the last few weeks and he's been absolutely brilliant for me. Yankuba Minte, your man from a couple of years ago, Sam. I think that you were ahead of your time. The definition of a live wire. What a player he is to watch, honestly. Loves a block shot assist and a kind of a micro touch assist this year. I still don't know how he got that assist when Rutter should probably have got it. More shots in the box than Welbeck over the last 6 and 13 chances created, all coming out in the season data, or he's now in the top 10 of non-penalty SGI. Playing like he is, he's so hard to contain, and I love watching him, even if I know I've previously said 9 times out of 10. I think it's probably 8 times out of 10 now. So he is improving. It's like it's lead to nothing in pure headless chicken mode. But as you've mentioned a few times as well, there's just such good home fixtures on the horizon. Right, next 3 aren't incredible. The Forest away, who obviously are improving. I don't really see much in that game. Villa at home, who are again improving in 14. West Ham at home in 15. Liverpool away in 16. Probably not something to worry about. Sunderland away at home in 17. Arsenal in 18. It's not the best game in the world. And then West Ham, Burnley. I mean, they are all those fixtures do have a but about them, but I don't know. I think there's a really strong case that between King at 4.5, maybe Potts at 4.4, all the way up to Minte now at 6.1. Apart from Elliot Anderson, there's nothing in there that I really am interested in. And at his price, the value that Minte does provide, or EV, is probably making a very strong case for the Gambian, who's not going away for AFCON.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I like you said at the start, I'm a big fan of his. And I think we've mentioned it on the pod at some point this season, but the problem with last season was that his minutes weren't as secure as you need them to be. He still had great data. When he was on the pitch, he was doing really well, but the minutes weren't absolutely locked in. This year, that has changed, and he looks like one of their most important players. He's getting 90 minutes a match. I think he got brought off like 2 minutes early in game week 12, so I was like, oh, minutes taking a dip. Maybe it's too late, but yeah, I think he's fine, and considering how well he's playing, Yeah, he's very tempting for me to bring in with my second free transfer. The question for me will be, do I bring him in now in game week 13 where he's got Forest followed by Villa, or do I wait until game week 15 when he could be my Ismail Assar replacement for West Ham at home immediately? So that's my specific question, but notice how I'm not really questioning whether or not I'm bringing him in. It's more of a case of when I'm bringing him in.
Yeah.
Because like you said, great home fixtures through this Christmas period. The minutes look secure. Brighton are a good attacking team. His data's good. Ticks pretty much all the boxes. The final thing I'll mention on him as well, he's been really good on the baseline BPS as well. So if he's getting any sort of attacking returns, he does tend to get the bonus as well. So yeah, 6.1 million, great value for money.
I agree. Final one in terms of value for money. Hard the Forest defense back on the menu, boys. Murillo, Milenkovic, Neco Williams down to 4.7. 4 yellow cards though, so we probably wouldn't go there. I've got Murillo on here actually at the moment. Obviously got a goal this week, but that's not really what you're looking at. I think the underlying point is because they've got Dyche in, you're basically kind of back to how it was last year in terms of how they're going to set up. Slowly, defensively, if you look at the game week by game week sort of underlying data, Liverpool this week's and not particularly the best one out there, but game weeks 9, 10, 11 under Dyche were in their top 5 weeks of the season for XGC. The others being Nuno under Nuno in week 1, and the 1-1 with Burnley when Ange first came in. So I think that they're definitely a consideration. They got Wolves coming up in midweek, and I think that I am not against bringing in a Murillo or bringing in a Milenkovic. I'm flagging them now. I'm not saying you should buy them this week, I don't think, but I'm definitely flagging them now because I think that they are good, solid 90-minute men. Dyche does not really rotate at all, and you know, a player like Milenkovic who has the upside in terms of averaging an attempt almost every game is definitely worth your while. Especially because they are distressed assets now. They've lost value. I think Murillo is actually 5.3 rather than 5.2 on the bracket. I think I was looking at Milenkovic for that price. And if you've got my Savona at 4.5 as well, while Ina's out, but probably not the one you'd be looking at. Murillo and Milenkovic. See what happens if Neco Williams is on that 4 yellow, which would put me off. But you know, if he was 4.7, that is ridiculous value for a player playing in defence like that.
Yeah, I mean, if we cast our mind back to the start of the season, we were bigging up Murillo, Milenkovic for the DEFCON, and Murillo now under a more defensive manager, he's picking up some pretty good DEFCON again. So yeah, I like the look of it. I think you're right, 5.3 million, but good enough fixtures to come to consider going there. Probably not quite at the top of my list yet, but I'm looking at a defender in game week. I think it's game week 14. So yeah, Wolves away followed by Everton at home. I can absolutely see clean sheets in either of those games. And at 5.3 million, he's fighting it out with cheaper assets than he would have done at the start of the season. I think if he was still at 5.5, 5.6, something like that, it would be more of a decision between him, Van Dijk, Munoz, that kind of bracket. And I don't think there's much competition there. But given where he's at, him versus a Senesi, for instance, seems like a bit of a closer call right now because they're both getting DEFCON, and Bournemouth's defensive, well, I suppose their underlying numbers haven't been terrible, but defensively they are conceding goals. Forest do look more solid than they have done. So I can see a shift across to Murillo or Milenkovic in the next few weeks for sure.
And the beauty of them is that once they're in, they're in. In terms of, you know, we're using that last week as a pro for Van Dijk, and you referenced at the start of the year, we like these players. Obviously, it all imploded with Marinakid, and chucking Nuno out. But you know, once they're in with a player like that. So that could be something that you could be really thinking about. And game week 14, it's certainly something that I'll be thinking about quite strongly, actually, if I'm looking for a defensive move, because the fixtures there, and you know, I've got them sorted, done. So yeah, just want to throw in as a future one, but yeah, definitely improving defensively. On that note, a quick word on rotation. I dug out a post from 2017 around this time, on this day, almost a couple of days later to
Wow.
I mentioned the Clayton James thing, where I just at the time was getting a bit irked by the fact that everyone back in the day when you spoke a lot more on X and were putting your team out there, people were like, oh, but rotation, blah blah blah, on every single player that was being raised. And I suppose at the time I was just like, every player's a rotation threat. The field becomes equal because they all become rotation threat. The idea is that just treat it as universal caveat outside of the extreme salient ones like a Doku or Pep, Man City in general. I think generally it's just a case of just seeing it and accepting it will happen. And I don't know, it's worth making a point that throughout all of this, we've spoken about, we've done 3 hits 1 week, fair enough. But if you're wildcarding, you're making transfers in, just treat it as universal caveat, because I think there's very few players outside of the Forest guys, Van Dijk, Saliba, where there isn't you being able to say, oh yeah, but rotation. And game week 14 in particular is going to be a mess. And I think it's just a case of probably just embracing it. I don't want to spend too long here, Sam, but I think it was just worth saying. And I think it's something that we'll just use going forward as a bit kind of like, as we said a few pods ago, just expect it's going to happen.
Yeah, I think it's important to make this note that, it will happen, but it will happen fairly evenly across the table for most players. There are some that are a little bit more immune, and there are some that I don't need to mention because we've already talked about several of them on this pod. But there are some that you're like, okay, I instinctively know that there's more of a doubt week to week, even outside of this period of the season. Therefore, those players are obviously going to be even bigger rotation threats. I think whatever level of rotation they have in a normal game week, amplify it during this whole period of the season. The caveat, those are the caveat ones. The general roster of players that we're talking about week to week, they all just have a little asterisk applied to them pretty evenly across the board, saying, rotation could happen, but it could happen to the player you're selling them for as well, or buying that week. Like, there's not much between them, barring a few of the caveats that we've already mentioned.
Yeah, that's right. I'm gonna just put this. I'm going to put this in, and then we'll go do the 1 week pump. I'll come back to it. But one thing I'm very keen to mention here is for game week 13 and 14 particularly, I'm keen to try to treat them as a pair. In some ways, just because it kind of just helps with thinking about the move you're making this week, because you probably need to use a transfer. You might not, and we'll come on to that in a minute, but I think that kind of just helps to guide the thinking a little bit in terms of what you're looking to do. Obviously, that isn't quite as incumbent upon you if you're free hitting, but it's just something to think about if you are kind of in the 70 or so percent who aren't hitting the free hit button this week. And that's just really important in terms of the moves you're making. We'll come back to that in a sec. Just to update on the 1 week punt update. I'm kind of running away with it a little bit now. Munoz for me, 14 last week. Unfortunately, as you found in your actual team as well, Saar with just the 3-pointer. It's been a bit. It's not gone great, but as you earlier on, I don't know. I've just been quite lucky with this one as well.
Yeah, they're 1 week punts for a reason. It's a bit of fun. Obviously, I'd love for a few more of them to be coming off, but I think what I've noticed is I tend to be going for the more more of the attackers where they don't have so many routes to points, and I'm just hoping for a spike. So maybe I need to play a few more of the defenders, hitting the defcons, hitting the clean sheets, and more routes to points there. But I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. I'm going to keep playing this the way I intended it, which is have a bit of fun and go after a player that I'm usually jealous not to own because I think they're going to haul, and then at least I hedge my happiness a little bit. Although last week was more, I'm going to double down because I think it's finally the week that Saar's going to come good. Didn't happen. So, oh well, I'm going back to hedging, and I'm going with O'Reilly this week because, like you say, he's been fantastic, got good attacking threat for a defender, great home fixture, benched this week, and obviously looks like one of Pep's preferred men at the moment. So yeah, I'm going with O'Reilly, and I doubt I'm going to need him later on in the season. So I've got loads of big names left to play, so I'm going to go on the attack second half. That's my plan.
Yeah, I kind of went with Dango this week just because big chance magnet, playing Burnley, all that sort of thing. I have used a few big names. I've used Gabriel, Bumo, Gakpo, Yeah, I've used Eze annoyingly, but yeah, I think that this one's cool. I'm happy to do that this week. Martin in the chat has just said that random stat Dango has one of the worst records for successful take-ons in the league this year. So
Ooh.
hopefully against Burnley he turns that over. But yeah, a big chance Magna. I just thought it wouldn't surprise me on a week where no one's going to run, not even free hitters. They'll all go Charde. Dango's the one that comes out of the game with a random hat trick. But yeah.
He's got it in him.
We'll see. I like that. I like that. Right, on to teams, and I think that this is one I've been looking forward to because, just help me, please, Sam. One decision has been made, which is a triple captain is active. I've got one free transfer and a king's ransom of 4.1 million in the bank. I can basically do anything or nothing. So I can do Rodon up to the most expensive defender in the game. I can do King up to Bumo or below. Obviously, I can do Enzo, who I own to Saka, who I was kind of thinking about, but I don't know whether against Chelsea this is the week to do it. Minte, Saka, just about. I feel like it is actually still a good team. So I'm not moving the goalkeeper around. That's Raya at the back. Tarkovsky plays over Anderson, who's away at Spurs, but that doesn't matter. Senesi away at Sunderland. I'll speak to about in a minute actually. Munoz at home to United. Fine midfield. Minte away at Forest, not expecting too much this week, but it is what it is. Bruno, not expecting very much at all because he is Bruno, but again, it is what it is. Enzo at home to Arsenal. Semenyo, who I think should be fit away at Sunderland. Up front, Thiago with the vice, Haaland with the captaincy, triple captaincy that is, and Mateta. And I don't know, I feel like because of what I was saying earlier on about treating 13 and 14 as a bit of a pair, something in me just kind of really is considering that Munoz and Senesi for me are both on the suspension tightrope. I wouldn't be surprised if at least one of them, who I think is going to be Munoz, gets the tactical yellow this game week. And I mentioned obviously selling Enzo on. This might be the week to get rid of him, etc., etc. The underlying is good, and I'm wondering about the merits of benching him this week if I did kind of sell King. So I'm not entirely sure about doing that. But then again, this is the week to do it. You look at the underlying data for Enzo, like he has performed well in the week you'd expect him to perform well, given what we know now about the teams he was playing against at the time. So he's done very well against teams like West Ham, Fulham, Brighton, Spurs, Wolves, and Burnley. So maybe his data is where you kind of expect it to be at a kind of an outer level. So Enze or Eze or Foden or something like that for him, or a Saka for him. I'm not too sure about that. I think I'm with you that I think that they do score this week, Chelsea, and I wouldn't be surprised if Enzo's part of that. Which probably leads me to think of something to shore up my defence. And I think that kind of leads me to think maybe Nico O'Reilly in for fun, or Ruben for beigeness, in for Rodon is kind of where I'm zeroing in on. And on Senesi, I probably bench him out of the three. Play Tarko, play Munoz. Bournemouth is second from bottom for XGC away from home. They've been really crap. He's got a really high EO, so that's something to think about. But I kind of rather, maybe I'm not saying this because I was burnt by Tarko this week, but I'd probably rather play Tarko this week and bench Senesi. I think it's Senesi actually. But yeah, I think I'd do that, and then maybe next week see what happens. But I could equally roll this. That's the problem. It's one of those things where I feel like I want to make a move because you've only got one free transfer at the moment. Blah blah blah. You might as well just get rid of them. But I could have 2 free transfers to roll into the midweek mystery box, which could be good fun as well because the team is serviceable. I just feel like with the City game there, and I'm not too inclined to make a transfer in midfield. Really, I don't think. I don't want to do the King move. So King out somebody else and then bench Enzo. I think that might be a recipe for disaster because he's the pen taker as well, probably unless Palmer's back. I'm leaning towards making a Rodon up to a Nico O'Reilly, which is still leaving me 3.1 million in the bank. I mean, yeah, sorry, that's an awfully long rant about stuff that no one really cares about. What do you think, Sam?
I think it's probably the section people most care about, Tom, of this show, hearing your team. So, yeah, several routes that you've posed there. I think naturally when you first sent me this team, I was like, well, the obvious Enzo to Saka done, like it just most screamingly obvious move there. But there is more nuance than that because, okay, Saka doesn't have the best fixture this week. If there's ever a time he would get rotated, it would be 14. I don't think it will happen, but it could happen. So if you're treating it as a block of two fixtures, then maybe not the time. But I think if you removed any of those caveats, it would make sense. But then you add in the 4 yellow cards for both Senesi and Munoz, and I do agree that it is quite likely that you're going to miss out on Munoz for Burnley. It's not definite. We're talking like it's absolutely booked in that he's going to like intentionally get a yellow card against Man United. Maybe I shouldn't be so cynical. I do think it is quite likely he does get a yellow card, but it might not happen. That being said, this could be a role. I don't think you need to make a transfer. And although I do like O'Reilly, I'm not so sold on him yet that I could guarantee you that he keeps playing. And if you're buying him with the intention that he also needs to cover your ass in game week 14, that's the week where I would be more worried about him. So I don't know. You're going to hate my suggestion. I would either probably roll, because then if these yellow cards do come through, then you've got 2 free transfers to deal with it, and you'll have more information to do so. You don't need to change anything about your starting 11 this week, in my personal opinion. The second choice, which you're really going to hate, and feel free to dismiss me straight away, get Van Dijk. And I know it's going to be laughed out of town because he's been terrible, but it's West Ham away. It's a decent chance of a clean sheet, and he's got great fixtures for long term. And I tell you who won't miss game week 14 because of minutes, Van Dijk. So you know you're going to be safe there. And the fixtures do continue in a very good stretch throughout. So I think it will level out. People will laugh at it. And I know it doesn't make sense right now, given what we've just seen, but I think it's a move that you're still quite likely to make in the future anyway. And it does just shore up the defense. You would start him ahead of either Senesi or Tarkowski, in my personal opinion. Probably, or maybe Enzo instead. I think he would improve your starting 11. And then next week, you've got yourself a guarantee of a player to cover one of those yellow cards if you needed to. But granted, I know that he's not popular right now. So I would also be very happy with rolling this team, knowing that 2 of your defenders could get suspended and you might need to react. And I think that gives you the flexibility to do so.
Yeah, I'd rather buy Van Dijk next week if I was going to do that. You know, I'd rather roll it him and do that.
I understand that.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm still leaning towards, like, because if I did Rodon to O'Reilly, I'd still be able to get Van Dijk in next week as that insurance pick, as that insurance buy. Like, for example, I wouldn't be too upset about losing Anderson, and I'd probably buy him back in game week 16, but I wouldn't be too upset about losing Anderson for City at home and Palace at home, for example. I wouldn't be too upset actually about losing Senesi potentially if he was suspended, because Bournemouth come up against Chelsea and United in the game with 15-16 before getting into a good game again in 17. It's a bit weird that I've been kind of circling around selling Tarko for quite a while, and now it just feels like, yeah, just kind of leave him in there because he's likely to do all right. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not interested. It kind of feels like either roll or take a chance on O'Reilly. I do think that, you know, I'm probably, if we didn't have the game week 16 refresh, then I would probably be thinking, yeah, I'm gonna roll. But because I've got that sort of insurance in in that not very long, like literally 2 weeks time, I am thinking that this might be a good kind of time to just kind of do that slight. It's not really aggressive, is it? Because you're buying a defender, but you know, a semi-aggressive move in a week, if for a fixture, I think it's going to be quite good. And I'm kind of just hoping that it's all right for 14. But I completely appreciate what you're saying. I mean, it could be It could be that I just kind of think, oh, I'll buy Ruben Diaz. But something about kind of buying Ruben Diaz is very similar to buying Van Dijk. It's without the DEFCON. Like, yeah, I'm not going to rule myself out of buying Van Dijk if I buy O'Reilly this week. So it kind of feels like I'm okay with doing both of those. Yeah, it's tricky. I think some of it I'm just basically resigned to game week 14. Probably most of my bench being used, and I think most people are going to be in a similar situation. So I'm not kind of seeing that as too bad a thing. I think we'll see. We'll be saying on Sunday that I don't expect Mateta to play, for example. And when I put myself in that situation, maybe I think having 2 free transfers is probably going to be a better thing, really, because it's not that long to roll it over. So I'm very torn between the two, and it wouldn't take very much for you can imagine like a goal for Leeds somewhere, a stupid mistake for City, and then suddenly that entire transfer being used as quite a hefty opportunity cost if O'Reilly doesn't return attacking wise. But, his data's all right.
Okay. It is.
Okay, I think that helps because I think it kind of helps me kind of narrow it down to the importance of rolling versus taking a chance given the context. So I'll see where I land, and maybe over the next few days, maybe things might just a solution may land in my lap. But we shall see.
Before we move on to mine, can I ask you, do you have a plan to get to Saka? Like, do you want to get to Saka, basically, is my question. Like, have you got a plan for him, or do you just not that bothered?
I do. So the idea would probably be that Semenyo goes to Saka in 15. And then I kind of figure it out from there. Enzo. And so the thing is that Enzo, if it was like this is the week, it's mentioned in the chat as well. If I want to get rid of Enzo, this is the week to do it. Say goodbye, see you later, mate. Thank you very much. The but is just because I can see them doing all right, and removing Enzo for Saka would obviously then eat up all of that flexibility that I've got in my bank balance. And that's a bit of a problem, and which does make me look at the likes of Rice, does make me look at the likes of Eze, and think, well, could they kind of be equivalent value? I could still, it's worth mentioning, get Van Dijk for Tarko next week. But it doesn't really help me when it comes to players like Senasai, who I could swap out for for one of the City players. So there are ways in which I could make that work. And it might be that if I'm not sure what I'm doing this week, getting Saka in might be the way to play it, but removing a pen taker for another pen taker, and that could be it could be one of those where it's kind of awkward, mate, but it's worth doing. That's maybe a third one on the horizon. I'll have to think about it this week.
My question on that wasn't should you get him this week? It was more, can you spend the money that I currently, in the back of my head, I'm like, oh, well, he needs that money to move to Saka later. But actually, from the sounds of it, you might be able to spend that money if you've got plan Bs and Cs to go without Saka, or to sell Semenyo to get to him. You don't need as much of that money spare. So that was the reason I asked, not oh, you need to get him now or anything like that.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I think that there would be ways and means to get there, even if it is game week 16. It's not a no, and I think that that there might be some cause to look at it for this week. Still somehow, I'll see where I land come this week. So I think I can just about get away with that defense. And maybe I would look at Enzo and think, it's time to get rid. I think it'd be easier for everybody if Semenyo was out and injured, because after the kind of next couple, I'm kind of like, I'm not really bothered if I'm without him for Chelsea or Man United, but I prefer to keep him, sort of thing. All right, more questions and answers still. And your team, Sam, you got 2 free transfers, and probably a bit more useful for you.
So 2 free transfers, used one of them to sell João Pedro for Thiago, was always on the docket for this week. Did have the choice of Mateta or Welbeck. Given Mateta I could have afforded if I downgraded elsewhere. I decided to keep it simple. Thiago just seems like a standout good value pick at that price. So he's in ahead of Burnley at home. And then I've got a second free transfer to use. Now, I do have the option of rolling it, a bit like you, just wait for next week. I think I'm more tempted to get rid of Enzo this week than you are, by the sounds of it. I'm pretty happy with my backline and defense. So Pope in goal, Lacroix, Timber, Senesi in my backline. I've got Anderson as cover on the bench. In my midfield, Bruno, Sarr, Saka, Semenyo, Enzo. So I think Enzo's the one that I'm most concerned by there, although he is currently absolutely smashing it on non-penalty XGI. So I do have that in the back of my mind. And then the two up front that all three hits will have, so Thiago and Haaland. So no problem there. Enzo for me he's been frustrating points wise, but the data's look good. So I am reluctant to get rid of him. But Arsenal next, I don't think is a great fixture, however you paint it. He could obviously return in it because he's a good player, but it's less likely than in other game weeks. Then you've got Leeds in the midweek, where again, I'm not going to try reading the tea leaves. I know butt rotation is very annoying, but yeah, possibly something there. And then obviously Bournemouth after that. So if there is going to be a week where they do fiddle with the starting 11, it's likely to be 14. And there are good picks that I don't have at that sort of price and below that also help me afford other moves in game week 14 if I were to downgrade Enzo now. It's also worth noting that with the money I've got in the bank right now, I could upgrade Enzo to Cunha, Foden, one or two. I think there's Rodgers even as well at the same sort of price. I've got options. I could go up to Foden and have a bit of a like a week to week punt in that position up till game week 15. But I think downgrading him to Minter, who's been fantastic, as you're very well aware, and I'm very confident on the minutes, underlying data is good, happy with the price point. Or I could go to Anderson of Nottingham Forest, who is really starting to show his worth on the DEFCON, highest DEFCON midfielder so far this season in terms of the average per game. He's starting to pick up the attack and returns as well. Good fixtures to come, as you referenced with Murillo. And again, I never need to look at the team sheet. And he's 5.3 million. He's going to tick along pretty nicely. And the underlying attacking data is not even that laughable. It's better than Rodgers. So it's like 0.26, I think, so far. Rodgers is 0.15. So given that he took a penalty recently as well, I don't absolutely hate it. And moreover from that, with either Minter or Anderson, by downgrading that Enzo position, I can then go to game week 14 knowing that I've got the money to upgrade a defender so that I can then bench Thiago. So Rodon or Anderson, likely Rodon, could easily go up to Van Dijk or Munoz if Munoz doesn't get suspended, of course, in game week 14, both of which have good fixtures that week, and then bench Thiago if I were to downgrade Enzo this week to Minter or Anderson. Either way, Minter's coming in either this week or 15. It's just figuring out the right order of which order I do it in, because Sarr goes in game week 15 probably. But yeah, I'm happy with my team. I'm jealous of the free hits, but I'm not like petrified of them. I've got high upside players here with less than ideal fixtures, but we see less than ideal fixtures pay dividends for good players with high upside plenty of times. So I'm not going to lose any sleep over it.
Yeah, no, I like that. And I think that you raise a good point that I should have mentioned about, again, tea leaf reading, but Enzo in 14, that's something that also is worth, I'm glad you gave voice to. I think that you've got a good opportunity there to just shore up that fifth mid spot. That should be something that is worth consideration. I do really actually quite like the Anderson pick. Because all the things we said at the start of the year, they went away when Ange came in, and they've come back when Dyche is back, because all of the things that commended him to us as a pick are still true. And I think that Forest is going to be a team that people are going to kind of start to look at again, which is why I included Murillo in the form versus fixture. Now I think that could be a really kind of good kind of long-term pick, and also you'd have both Andersons, which is always really cool. I think that either of them are really good sort of next steps. Probably be more minded to give Minte a couple of weeks, just because obviously I own him and it's a bit different, but if I was buying fresh now, with Forest looking best defensively and Villa looking better in general,
I'm wondering
next two, I'd just be thinking, even though he's a baller, even though he's great fun to watch, etc., and so on, whether this is the right entry point for him. Maybe that game 15 for West Ham, Maybe over, maybe kind of for Christmas, maybe that'd be the time to get him in, even though there is the Arsenal game on Saturday, 27th. Maybe Anderson actually. Maybe
Anderson also means I don't need to worry about prices. Like
No,
I've got the money spare. I can move late. With Minter, I've got like 0.2 wiggle room right now, and that Minter's going to rise. Van Dijk might rise. Like if we get to game week 14, I might get priced out. It's unlikely because Van Dijk's not rising in price anytime soon. But either way, Munoz, Van Dijk, I might get priced out. Whereas Anderson, it gives me that extra 0.8 wiggle room. I've just got nothing to worry about. And I will go to Minter in 15 if I don't now. It's just whether or not it's basically who do I think is going to score more points in the next 2 weeks? It's the simplest question in FPL. Is it Anderson or is it Minter? Minter's better on the attacking upside. And my heart tells me Minter surely scores more points. But actually, Anderson's routes to points, even if they're boring points, he's going to get 4 points a week minimum, you'd think. He might get a return in there. He might get some bonus. He might spike a clean sheet or two. He could easily even it out, and at cheaper price, it might be the right entry point for me whilst he's differential. I don't know.
Which Brighton shows up, we don't know. And Wolves are the weakest team in the division. So I think that seems like quite a smart pick. And I might be joining you next week on the Wolves player. Not the Wolves player, on the Forest player. That would be Cresshy's just making so great, having such massive XG. But no, probably maybe joining you next week on a Forest player. I think I'm going to just offer a big solution to lots of people. Anyway, you heard it here first. And next week, when everyone's talking about it on socials, you'll be like, WTA spoke about that first. We Simpsoned it. Right. Anyway, there you go. Let's see what happens. I'm buying Saka apparently after this.
Well, we'll see about that. And thank you all so much for listening. As always, we have been Who Got the Assist. You can find us on Blue Sky at Who Got the Assist, all written out one word. FPL Pricey for me on there. On X, we're WGTA_FPL. And again, FPL Pricey for me. And on YouTube, it's again written out all one word. Who Got the Assist, and I'm over there at FPL Pricey. I'll do a Friday night live stream as always if you want to tune in for that. If you did enjoy the pod, we'd really appreciate you giving us a follow on those social channels. Giving the pod a 5-star rating wherever you listen is also greatly appreciated, as is leaving a like and hitting subscribe on YouTube. All of those things really do help us out. Thank you all so much.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. I should probably mention FPL Meets is coming up again. I completely forgot about that. FPL Meets in London at the Thirsty Bear in Waterloo. It's the 6th of December, 12 p.m. onwards. Aston Villa versus Arsenal in the early kickoff. Lots of free PMs going on, so lots of shenanigans while we get all our beers and have a really awful pizza. And it's Leeds versus Liverpool in the evening. I think I'll be going along to this one actually. If you can come along, definitely do check out at FPL Meets on X. Otherwise, thanks Sam. A great video with Press this week on Sam's YouTube. You definitely go off and check that out immediately if you're watching or listening right now and you have a bit of time. And thanks for listening in general and watching in general. Hope this is you think about game week 13 and all the chips that are going to be played. Good luck this game week, unless you're free hitting, in which case I hope that you fail miserably. We'll be back on Sunday because of the quick turnarounds, and then Wednesday next week, and we'll be missing the United game, I think, which is on the Thursday, but it can't be helped because what's the point in podding on Thursday night for a pod that's going to last a couple of days? It won't be long until we see you again. We'll see you on Sunday.
Oh, it's a goal. Who got the assist? Who got the assist?
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Apúrate que se acaban las ofertas de Early Black Friday en Lowe's. Ahorra hasta 50% en electrodomésticos selectos y hasta 25% extra en combos de electrodomésticos selectos. Y como la Navidad ya se siente, ahorra $4 en luces LED de 100 bombillas en hilera GE. Ahora solo $5.98. Lowe's, nosotros ayudamos. Tú ahorras. Válido hasta 12/3. Selección varía por tienda. Solo en tiendas selectas hasta agotar existencias. Detalles en Lowe's.com.